Hi, I'm Phil Palucha from Billionaires in Boxes, and you are set to watch or listen to The Heart of the Trial. Fantastic interviews, incredible insights. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Turner, and welcome to a podcast delving into the personal narratives within the clinical research industry. Through candid interviews, we'll learn about the personal journeys and motivations of individuals who have chosen this profession, what I like to call their why. This podcast is not just for industry insiders. It's for everyone curious about the human side of healthcare. Beyond the industry's negative reputation, we'll shed light on the dedicated professionals behind clinical trials. Join us as we uncover the heart and passion of those working tirelessly behind the scenes in clinical research. Welcome to Heart of the Trial. Hello, lovely listeners. I'm your host, Suzanne Turner, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to Heart of the Trial, where we uncover the human stories within the clinical research industry and shed a positive light on the pharmaceutical industry. Today's guest is Teresa Davis, and she has over 15 years of experience in the clinical research industry. So welcome to Heart of the Trial, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so excited to talk about what you do, because I think it's going to be really important for our listeners to hear about the compliance side of our trials. So why don't you start by telling us what you do and how that fits into clinical research?
Yeah, so currently I'm an associate director of clinical operations, but my team, we sit within that group, but we're called clinical compliance. So I've been doing, like you mentioned, 15 years in the industry, starting off as a monitor, when fell in love with RBM, RBQM, and then which naturally, for whatever reason, led me to clinical compliance. And I've been really passionate about it ever since.
And just for our listeners who may not be familiar with it, can you explain what RBM and RBQM are?
So it's risk-based monitoring is RBM, and RBQM is risk-based quality management. So this stemmed from a regulatory draft guidance initially years and years ago, maybe over 10 years ago now. I'm dating myself. So what it is, we take a risk-based approach to running a clinical trial from protocol development through the end of the trial. So really identifying risks to patient safety and data integrity at the beginning during protocol development. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I really think it reduces the risk to our patients and makes it even easier to perform this trial, right? And more efficient and safer. And we, all the things that I really feel are excellent about that. So, and that led me into quality compliance with my monitoring background and risk-based quality management.
So I want to talk more about your background, because one of the things I know I'll talk about on this podcast a lot is this industry is not something that you see at the school fairs when they're talking about career day, right? We did not leave high school going, I want to be in TMF. I want to be a clinical compliance specialist, right? So tell me, how did you get into this industry? How did you get there, grow, and end up where you are now?
It was actually because of my sister, Lisa. She was working for Shire at the time, and she was also part of what HBA, which is Healthcare Businesswomen's Association. She was being honored as a rising star at Shire at this HBA event. And she invited me, and I was so inspired. I saw all these amazing, talented, smart women in this group. So that was the first catalyst. And me thinking about, okay, though, there's something besides retail out there for me. so
that's for sure. and just to throw in for our listeners, and one of the things I love about this industry, and I think is very cool, and I think you've seen it too, because you just mentioned it, is it is a very women heavy industry. There are a lot of women bosses out there in this, which is just amazing. So that is so cool. So you were so inspired. And so what did you look into first? Yeah.
Well, and then my niece, Emma, she was actually diagnosed with PHA,
Oh my gosh.
arterial hypertension, at the age of 5.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think she was that young, and I never heard of it being diagnosed in a patient that young. And she got enrolled. She was eligible to participate in a clinical trial for the Broviac catheter, Broviac line, which is a direct line into her heart. So, my brother and sister-in-law would basically, submit study drug into her heart directly this line. So she had an open, patch where they
had to cover it and cover it when they bathed her.
Yes. So,
wow.
And I didn't even know something like that existed. And so I asked Lisa, my sister, how do I get involved in this? How do I participate? This is amazing. Because they gave her a very short life expectancy at 5. And she's still alive today. So she's in her college years. Yeah.
Wow.
So exciting.
So right there's your why, which I'm glad it came up so early, because that's a big deal. Why we do that. You literally saw how clinical research impacted your own personal life and honestly saved your niece's life. That's, oh my gosh. Yeah. That's amazing. Okay. So what did Lisa tell you? How did you get involved?
Lisa, well, my background is English and art.
Oh.
Once I found out that anything outside of English and art took more than pre-algebra, I said I can't do it. I am not very good with math, as my coworkers know.
Yeah.
So she said, I'm very detail oriented. So she says, look into becoming a CRA. And so I got my CRA certification. And the company who ran it, they had a contracting business related to, if they saw great talent coming out of the certification course, I immediately, very green, became a CRA contractor and started monitoring on a phase 4 registry study.
Which CRA is a clinical research. No, it's okay. It's okay. And this is, I'm just doing my best to make sure, because for our listeners are going to learn along the way that there are a lot of acronyms in clinical research. And I'm just doing my best to help them know what that is and understand it and connect it. So a CRA is a clinical research associate, and they're literally that monitor that we were just talking about. They are the one who goes out to the site. So I apologize. Go ahead and continue.
Yeah. No, and so once I got that CRA or monitor certification, I started monitoring and I fell in love with it. And, after that, I just kind of went it's a lot of travel.
Yes.
So
I really feel for CRAs. And that's, I feel like another thing I want to show our listeners is that, you have to care to put as much time in as you did, because how often were you traveling? You were probably gone from home 90% of the time or so, right?
Yes. And it was across the country travel. So it wasn't regional. Yeah. It was across the U.S. travel. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time was spent on overnight trips. So fly there and then the next morning go on site to the doctor's office. But it was really the first chance I got to be involved in such a detailed level with the patient. And I love reviewing the patient source and getting a feel for the patient profiles and really informing me about who these patients were on our trial. And I felt like being that connected was really making a difference. And so I really got inspired by just being on site and seeing all the patient data and this is really amazing what we're doing, seeing them improve or their lab numbers improve or their it was just really inspiring.
Oh my gosh. I kind of got goosebumps listening to that, because I can totally see that. And, just to kind of, again, explain to any listeners who may not be familiar with clinical research, when you're talking about the patient data, something, we never actually see what we call private health information related to patients. Patients are given, special codes, I guess you could say, patient numbers. Yes. And So their privacy is protected. So all that you're seeing, so the only ones who actually know who these patients are is the actual doctor, and everything else is blinded from us. So when you go on site, you're literally just seeing numbers and blood work and stuff like that. So you don't know their names. You know nothing about them besides some of the basics of, like, maybe this is a 5-year-old female with this health condition. And the fact that you can still feel such a connection with them, I think is just amazing. And, that's actually something I hope in the future to get to experience. I've never got to be on site. And it's one of my goals. I'm like, at some point I would love to go on site with a CRA and actually experience that, because, from the TMF side, we see a lot of documents that come from the site, but, to really be in there and experience it, I think would be so cool. Like I said, it gave me goosebumps talking about it. Oh my gosh. So how long did you do that? How long were you a CRA and going, spending all this travel time going to sites?
Yeah, I really fluctuated in-house and on-site. I found a lot of value in being on-site, but then remote monitoring, what we do as an in-house CRA, really intrigued me because I love data analytics. I love data. So I got to really look at the data holistically from a remote. I could go into the vendor portals. I could look at, so being an in-house CRA better informed my on-site CRA. So, whenever a company would kind of reorg or maybe downsize, you'd have to change roles. So I kind of fluctuated. If my in-house CRA role went away, I would go be a CRA again. And so really did that for almost 8.5 or 9 years, being a monitor. And then right about that time, Spotfire came into my life. For anybody who doesn't know, it's like a data analytics tool.
Oh.
Yes, Spotfire came into my life at that time, which is why I fell in love with data analytics and reviewing outliers and looking for trends in data. So that's where I shifted into the risk-based monitoring that we talked about prior.
That's amazing. And so was that like you shifted companies in order to do that? Or so you kind of shifted companies, went into a different role. And how long did you do that? Because you obviously did something where you went from that to get into focused clinical compliance.
Yes. So I did RBM, or analytical risk-based monitoring, for about 4.5 years.
Wow.
So it was, again, fell in love with it. Everything about it was statistical surveillance, all these big data words. But basically, you're looking at numbers within a system, and you're looking for trends, and you're looking for data risks that you see, outliers, and you're looking for all of that within these different vendor systems and portals and dashboards. And so I did that for about 4.5 years. And right at that time, I found kind of my love for quality too, and process.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of really changing mindsets and going back to the regulations and really showing people the need for risk-based monitoring, the need for RB, risk-based quality management. And we partnered very closely with the quality team as they were rolling out their RBQM, method. While we had our RBM process, they were, and I got really excited about the quality piece, because compliance is this really beautiful kind of trifecta between process, like clinical operations process, quality, and then regulatory, kind of all blend together. So you have to be very compliant with the regulations, but you also have to have your processes developed and have the quality mindset in there. So I call it my compliance funnel. So you have like the regulations up here, the FDA, EMA, ICH, GCP, all of the country level regulations. Then you have your company or your sponsor, your CRO, SOPs and procedural documents. And then at the bottom, you have your protocol, right? And within there, there's different checks and balances for, are you being compliant with said regulation? So impact assessments, right? So I can get into it, but I call it my compliance funnel.
I love it.
Every part of the clinical process has a compliance component. And once you start educating people and training them on what that means, and they really buy in. And if you take everything back to the process level, it's easier to have a really fluid change management within your company. So that's why it just blended really nicely from risk-based monitoring into compliance for me personally.
Yeah. And I think what's really great about it, and I think everyone, no matter what industry they're in, has experienced this, how individuals will set up, they'll put processes in place, right? But they're not the ones doing the work or the day-to-day. And you've been a CRA, you've been an in-house CRA, you've done all those things. So you're able to look at it from that higher level and connect it back to the real individual who's going out and doing this, and saying, let's make this work for you, but at the same time, ensuring the top compliance possible. I think that's really cool.
Yes, and it's such an advantage. I have to say, because I can read an SOP and tell you if it's going to be operational or not. Right?
Yes. That's so awesome. So do you do that for companies? Do they hire you? Not because like right now you're an associate director, but do they hire you just to come in and review their processes and say, like, tell us where the gaps are, tell us what we're missing or what we could do better? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So in my last 2 roles prior to my current company, that was my purpose. I owned all of the clinical operations SOPs.
Yeah.
At my last company. And for almost 2 years, I owned all of them. Periodic reviews, update to process, new process. If I found a gap, like you mentioned, doing a gap assessment, gap analysis upon joining, identify gaps in process, build out that process for them. And then obviously you always have fluctuations and updates and, changes to process. So I own those as well. But I think having that holistic knowledge of what every function does within our industry, I've really perfected that over the last 3 years. So I know what safety does. I know what our regulatory team does. I know what our quality team does. And so I can build a better, more operational process, knowing who's responsible for every single step. So that's been in here. In my current role, I do own many of the site monitoring processes for site activation, satellite sites, site closeout, site monitoring. We do outsource to our CROs, but clinical research organizations. So, but I still own all of the updates to those. We're big here on any team member can submit a process improvement request.
Oh, cool.
And it's amazing. So those doing the work see the need for improvement. They submit a request. I get the request. I kind of assess it to say, yes, I can see, and then do an impact assessment. Does this impact other functions, other processes? And then I work to improve the process through, following our quality management document, SOP, that whole process.
Yes.
So it's really amazing. And I have to say, not everything, that's an exaggeration, but almost everything comes down to process.
I agree with you. Honestly, I really do. I see that from obviously doing what you do. You work a lot with TMF. So you're very familiar with the trial master file and what I do as well. And I feel the same way, honestly, that if you can get that process in place and it's a functional process from the get-go, everything's going to be so much more smooth. And the fact that you guys are taking feedback, and applying that. Because again, I feel like that happens so often, that disconnect between the one creating the process and the ones going through it. And what I also love about your role as you were talking about this is the fact that you are so connected to all these other departments, like, really understanding safety and quality and working together. It's kind of like you're in this little spot at the top where you can just see everything, right? So, that is so cool. And I'm trying to think what else, why don't you tell me what else has kind of rolled into what you do or what your favorite parts of it are, or, that kind of stuff. 'Cause this is so fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, and I also know the aspect of compliance is obviously documentation.
That's my passion.
Yes. It's also training, right?
Yes.
Training at multiple levels, like study level training, SOP training.
Yes.
So a lot of my current role as a training lead is to review training metrics. Are we being compliant with our 90% goal to get all of our training completed within the said time frame? Documentation of training. How do our CROs train on our procedural documents? How do our CROs train on theirs? And how is it documented? And are we having oversight of it? So a lot of training. And the other really thing I like is being really informed about new regulations coming in. So we have a really great team here. We get weekly I choose weekly. You could get daily. Updates of regulations. And then we have a team who performs impact assessment. And if we're included in that, we get to help, do an impact assessment. Are we being compliant with that new regulation? If no, how do we improve our compliance to it? And I think with all the recent changes in the structure of the FDA and the new groups they have that they're building out, we're going to see maybe more regulations. Simply because one of the inside jokes I've always had with my team is like our data and our technology is far surpassing our regulations. So there's always this ground where like our regulations aren't quite there. They're draft guidance or they're not quite there.
Right.
Technology.
The drafts that sit there for years, right? I know. How long has ICH E06R3 been sitting there? And for our listeners, that's one of the key ICH good clinical practice documents that we follow in the industry, and they've been updating from version 2 to version 3 for years, and supposedly this year is supposed to be the year, so we'll see.
It's a great question because in that time you had technology far surpassing of our regulations, so you have to use really critical judgment on. Do you feel this is applicable given the not outdated, but given the older regulations?
Yes.
How do we make sure we're still compliant if we're inspected, but you taking advantage of really great technology out there?
Oh, the technology is very amazing what they're starting to be able to do in the industry, and having the different systems talking to each other and even doing the work, some of the work for you. That is amazing and good for you guys, because I think that sponsor oversight is huge. I mean, we both 100% agree on that. That sponsors are, kind of for our listeners, when sponsors outsource their clinical trials to a CRO, a clinical research organization, they're hiring them to run their trial pretty much, or certain pieces of their trial. However, no matter what, and this is what, FDA regulatory guidelines say, is that the sponsor is still responsible 100% for that trial, no matter who's running whatever piece of it. So the fact that your company that you're working for now is trying to go above and beyond what they know the regulations are is so amazing. And I think a lot of that probably shows how amazing you are, because, like if you're paying attention and if you're caring and wanting to ensure compliance all the way through, you are doing those things. Like, this may be the regulation, but how can we go even further than that?
Yes. And another thing is also what I've learned is, it sounds so basic, but really great communication.
Yes. It's not basic. It's such an issue.
Across companies, across departments, even within your own team, you don't have very transparent, open dialogue, communication. This new procedure is coming out at this date. This is impacted. This is the date it's effective. Make sure you have everybody following this new SOP on it. It's going to be in your LMS, learning management system. So it's just communication is really, really important.
Yes. Yeah. And if you can foster an environment where individuals are comfortable with that communication, you're going to be even more successful. I'm a huge proponent on questions. People who work with me, they know I ask a lot of questions. And when I manage individuals or have anyone reporting to me, I make it clear that questions are good. I like questions. This tells me you're thinking, you're critically thinking, you're looking beyond me just saying, do this. You're like, but why am I doing that? And I went to do this, but I saw this. Like, I'm a huge proponent of questions and communication. And when you have that, your team runs so well together, because the trust is there too. Because obviously your teams are trusting that you're putting things in place for them, and they're trusting to come to you to say, hey, this process isn't working. Can we maybe make an adjustment? So, communication.
I think my team in my prior role, I led a team of 13 in all, from apprentice to associate director. Yeah. And I made the number one thing I said when we're meeting, you have to turn on your camera so I can see you. Because I want to see you're hearing me, you're engaging with me. You have to ask questions, and I ask for feedback probably to some of their this many everyone's how to move.
Yeah, I'm big on that too, though. Even when other people aren't on camera, I mean, I'd say 90% of the time you're going to find me on camera, even if not. And from it, you probably don't run into this issue as much, but I'm sure, as you're aware, TMF, we can sometimes struggle with teams. TMF is not always everyone's favorite topic, but I'm big on that engagement. And so once I'm brought into a client or whatever, like, I want them to see me, because I want them to recognize me. When someone says Suzanne, I want them to know who Suzanne is. I want them to see me, because if it just becomes more natural, right? I'm a part of the team. It's normal. So I agree with you. I love cameras on, and I don't know about you, but like most of the time, like we both are looking pretty good today, because we know we're on the podcast. But on my day to day, like my hair might be in my hair bonnet. It might be up in a bud. I could be wearing a hoodie, right? Like it doesn't matter if you're looking perfect on these cameras. You're not telling your people they have to be dressed to the nine. Wear your cap. It's okay. Like, just be on camera so we can connect. And I mean, especially with so many jobs in our industry are remote now, right? Because how long other than obviously you traveled, so you were probably never in an office as a CRA, but how long have you been working remotely?
Since 2017.
Yeah.
Almost 7 years. Remote, and it is a blessing.
Yes.
People laugh at me, but I almost feel like I'm more productive at home, because I know my family's safe. I know they're good. I can, have my daughter downstairs laughing. I can, and when I'm away from them, it's probably because I'm a worrier, but I worry about them. Yeah. And I have a harder time focusing and engaging when I'm like traveling or in the office. So, part of that's probably my nature, but like when I'm home and remote, and, I feel good because I know they're safe and I don't worry, and I'm even more engaged than I am typically on site.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, I don't think I could. I do miss sometimes having more constant interaction with people, but I don't think I could ever go back to the office. And I agree with you. I feel like we're so productive because we're able to just get in there and do our stuff and get out when we need to. And I love that the industry has really turned that way. Like, honestly, I don't know about you, but I'd say like the current client I'm working with, 90% of them easily or more remote. Like, there's only a few people who tend to go into the office, and it's also expanded our connections, right? Yeah. Like you and I connecting. So it's a really cool thing. And speaking of that, so what would you say if we have some listeners out there and they're like, oh, listening to Teresa talk about all this clinical compliance stuff or being a CRA or whatever is so amazing. What would your advice to them be if there's someone who's not in this industry and they're interested in getting in? What are some routes they can take?
when I was starting out, there wasn't a lot of degree programs like you mentioned, but now there's everything from associate's level degree, bachelor, master's, certifications. Like if you are interested in going that route, that's a really great way. If you're like me and you're a little bit ahead in life and you just want to jump right in, I think getting your CRA certification, I know a lot of CROs have programs where they, just take people and train them to be CRAs. And then, you can start working for that CRO right away. That's another route. I think anything, getting a certification, number one. Number two, build a LinkedIn profile. I know people hate that.
No, it's
have to have a LinkedIn profile. Yes. And you have to, not sell yourself. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And, this is my training. This is my certification. This is my qualities. Even if they're not specifically clinical research related, you still have qualities as a worker, as an employee to say, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at this. And then, those are the three main ways I think is to either get the certification, like if you're young enough, go to college, get the degrees, all the degrees that you could possibly get. But if you're older in life like me, learning how to join a CRA program to become a CRA. And then the CRA is one of the best starting points because you can go to any direction from it. You can go to data management. You can go to safety. You can go to regulatory because you have that foundational knowledge of every aspect of a clinical trial from the site perspective.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. And the LinkedIn profile, listeners, I apologize. You'll probably hear that a lot on this podcast because I think you're 100% in agreement with that. It's like the number one way to get connections and honestly jobs a lot of time. Like the number of recruiters that reach out on a consistent basis or I've seen sponsors, I've seen CROs, I've seen all of them like post like, hey, we're hiring for this type of position. So not just having a LinkedIn profile, but having a really beefed up LinkedIn profile, have a professional photo, have a lot of details and keywords that someone for the position would be looking for. And I think that's a really great point. I know people may not want to hear it, but in this industry, LinkedIn is huge. And also,
I'm awesome.
No, I want you to go. You go.
I'm awesome. If it's within the budget of whomever is looking, I think if you're transitioning careers, a career coach is absolutely amazing. Even if it's just to help you with your resume and LinkedIn, right? Or just to give you a couple interviewing tips and tricks. But I've seen such a dramatic improvement in my ability to communicate and, project and have that whatever confidence that you want to have, through finding a career coach. And
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you did that to just help progress your, yourself. Yeah.
Because I'm naturally an introvert.
I can see that. Yeah.
and I'm naturally, I avoid conflict, right? So me wanting to grow into senior director, executive director, I have to be able to have those conversations that might be conflicting or might be
uncomfortable. Really?
Yes. Yeah. So I found working with that career coach has helped me build that foundation. And I've always been confident, but not necessarily when it comes to conflict resolution. Right. So that's where I've really had to grow, and they can help you do that. Whatever you feel might be your area of growth. Yeah. A career coach could really do that for you.
Oh, that's an amazing piece of advice. How cool. I might have to look into that just because I'm growing myself and my businesses and everything. So, and I'm the same with you. Conflict, as we both know, as you move up in the levels, becoming a manager, becoming director levels and all, you do have to get in those situations, and it can be so uncomfortable. And I was lucky to have some really great mentors to help me, and I've definitely grown there, but it can never hurt to grow more, to be able to try to make those more comfortable situations. Oh, goodness. Right. So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of going back to your why. So obviously the why as to why you got into this industry and really gave you that push comes back to your niece, which I still think is just amazing. And I can't wait to hear as I have, guests in the future, how many of them have a connection like that, because I think even with our listeners, I'd be surprised if there aren't a lot of listeners who have some kind of a connection without possibly even knowing it. But you've been in this industry now for 15 years. So what's been your why to keep you going for 15 years and continue doing this?
It's always, for me, outside of my family, it's maybe, cliche, but it's really for the patients, right? I've always wanted to help, and I didn't have the educational background of like a doctor, right? I can't do math very well. So being a doctor was never in the cards for me. My sister is one, but not for me, right? So this is a way I feel like I can have that direct positive impact on our patients without having to actually be a doctor. And it's one of the most stable industries, I have to say. And that's another thing for people looking. It is so huge. The industry is so huge.
Yes.
So, there's so many opportunities for growth and development. If you find, like you said, those people who will mentor you, and it's very diverse. I love the diversity in our industry. I love the opportunity. I love the, for growth. And it's really, supported my family so well for 15 years. So I'm very grateful for that, for not knowing it existed.
Right.
Prior.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing is like talking with some other, just in day-to-day talking with people, how many of them we almost fall into it accidentally, right? Like we end up in this industry and then you somehow connect with it and that passion just grows. And, you call it cliche, but I think it just shows that you have an understanding of why we're doing this, why we do this. It comes down to those patients that, we're saving lives, we're extending lives, we're making their just their day-to-day lives better. Yes, their quality of life. Thank you. That I was like, what's the word I'm looking for? Quality of life better. And it's so fascinating. I love talking about this with people in the industry. So without giving any specifics that you can't give, because obviously there's a lot of, confidentiality in our industry, but what kinds of different things have you been part of? Like, devices, drugs, et cetera, what types of different things have you been part of?
So I've been part of a combination, study drug, which was an injectable under the skin for type 2 diabetes.
Oh.
And it was so amazing. It was my first it wasn't strictly device because the FDA called it a combination drug. Oh. You insert it, you inject it under the skin. And it was, the drug was.
So it was like you inserted some type of device under the skin and then the device released the actual medicine.
Yes.
Oh, how cool.
It was so cool. And then the most current one that I've just been fascinated with is a genetically modified organism, an oncolytic virus, where you take the herpes simplex virus and you inject it with the active, study drug.
Yeah.
And then you inject it into the tumor, or I'm using very layman's terms.
Right.
You inject it. And for me, because it was a melanoma skin cancer study, you could see the direct positive impact of the study drug versus lupus, where you may not have seen it visually and could have with like reduction in alopecia, right? You could see it in some of the images, redacted, everything's redacted.
Yes.
But with melanoma, it was so amazing to see the actual improved right in there after image with each visit. So those are really the two that I think have been the most life-changing for me, because it's just been so different than, not that oral medication is very beneficial too. But, but this is those were the two. I'm like, this is really unique. This is really different. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when I'd say the everyday individual thinks about drugs and the pharmaceutical industry, they are thinking about those oral medications that they're being given. And, but there's so much more to clinical trials and the research that goes on, because if you think about it, literally everything, when you go in for a surgery, anesthesia had to go to it. Oh my God, I said that right? Yeah. The whatever tubings they might put into you for something, or like my dad's actually has lymphoma and he's been going through treatments and he's doing fantastic. But he had to have a port put in. He's actually at two. Yeah, he's like a permanent port now, but then he had one that was like hanging out for a few weeks for them to put stem cells and all in. But like, that had to go through a trial for them to even something as simple, like I want to know who invented the, when they take blood and they enter one needle and then just put the different tubes in, that person's rich. That person, I've been saying that for years, that person's rich. But every simple little thing, like it couldn't have just gotten out there. So it's even, it is. It's cool to hear that there were things beyond just oral medications, because how amazing. And the person who thought of this, right? Like who thought of that device that goes under the skin that releases the medicine? That's amazing.
And what's really interesting on top of all of that is now we're getting to a point with technology and with the advancements of individualized patient medicine. Yeah. So such as my current work, where we take a patient's, I'm just going to use layman terms, we take their white blood cells, we ship them, we inject them, make sure it's it's active, we ship them back to the patient, it's re-injected, right? Yeah. So that is specific to that one patient. Yeah. And it's really exciting. I mean, it's per patient, that individualized patient, treatment is really amazing and exciting, because I think you're going to see more of a, not more benefit, but really unique to each patient is going to be huge.
Right. Because not every, which I want to have a whole episode on pharmacovigilance and, how drugs react to the body and all, because and your body reacts to the drugs, and like, because that's just amazing. But that's the thing, right? Like giving someone the exact same pill, everyone's going to react differently. Some are going to react better, some aren't. But when you're actually making it for them, it's literally for them. Is it that's the like RNA, what's the terminology they've been using for these things?
We use CAR T is what we use here, but the mRNA, they take that protein.
Yes, it's using what's already. Yeah, but it's kind of the same concept, right? Using something that's already in the person's body and modifying it in some way and putting it back in, right? Mm-hmm. Or kind of along the same line. Yeah, I don't get as technical with TMF. We don't get quite as technical. So that's why I love having conversations with individuals like you as well, because it's so cool to me to see that other side, because I see it come across in paperwork, but to actually hear it, or like I worked for one client I worked for, they had a video that, was part of our required training. It was like very short, like 15-minute video, that explained pretty much what they were doing, right? What the study was. And by the time that 15 minutes was over, I was like mind blown, because not only did I fully understand what they were doing, which was amazing, but I'm like, I feel like I'm an expert in that 15 minutes, just hearing it explained the way they did versus reading it on a paper. Right. So, that is so very cool. Okay. Well, I guess it's kind of time to wrap up. So is there anything else you want to say to our listeners before we do wrap up, that you want them to know about the industry or anything?
Maybe what my career coach told me, it's all about networking. So please grow your network, get involved, volunteer, join organizations like Fuse. I joined Fuse as a volunteer. Some of these all volunteer organizations where you get to be part of writing white papers. You get to be part of like industry knowledge. Just grow your network and, get involved is really going to make make it an easier transition into the industry, but also help you if you want to grow more quickly once you're in the industry.
Yeah, if you're
There's so many organizations and LinkedIn, I cannot say no.
Yeah, I know.
Get on LinkedIn. Join these pages because, I mean, you can join the FDA LinkedIn page and get.
Yep, I follow them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice, Teresa. I really do, because I think no matter what role you're in, there's some type of organization for you. TMF, we have, CDISC, where the TMF reference model is, just for an example. Like, because also you can't be in an industry and not be pleased with how things are going and not in some way participate, right? But so I love that advice. And I'm so glad you came on today. Thank you so much. And where can, I'll definitely make sure to post this in the podcast information, but where can people reach out to you? Where can they connect with you other than LinkedIn, of course, LinkedIn? Where else can they reach out to you if they want to connect?
I'll leave my email with you, my email account, and then I'm on LinkedIn, but that's really the only social media network. But other than that, reach out, call me. Happy. I love mentoring. I love whatever. Just reach out. I'm happy to help.
That's awesome. Thank you again so much, Teresa. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye-bye. This brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest for sharing their inspiring journey. If you'd like to connect with them, you can find their contact information in the show notes. I also want to express my gratitude to you for joining us on this exploration of the clinical research industry. I hope you found today's episode insightful. If so, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It truly helps us reach more listeners. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments about the show, feel free to email me at podcast@iceconsultingllc.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to having you joining us on our next episode of Heart of the Trial.
Thank you for enjoying this content by Billionaires in Boxes. If you would like to be a guest or a host, be sure to get in contact with us at billionairesinboxes.com.